Hi, and welcome to day 77 of 365 Days of Art. Today is a little bit of a catch-up day and comparison day, trying to go over a couple of projects that I've been working on recently. If you've been keeping up, you've seen that I've been working on spinning acrylic pours, where I've actually put them on a Lazy Susan. So first, let's go ahead and take a look at the 4 different canvases that I did, where I took them all the way from the start. So if you want to check out that video, I'll put a link in the description. What happened was I used 4 cheap store-bought canvases. We sanded them down to a smooth finish and then applied gesso 4 different ways to try to see what would give me the best result, because I was really loving how smooth the acrylic pours were drying on wood. A little bit of a spoiler for you, none of these canvases dried as smooth as it does when I do an acrylic pour on wood, so that is hands down still my favorite. But I also do appreciate the way that the weave comes through the canvas, and as somebody had pointed out to me in person, some people really do like that when they look at a painting. They want to be able to see the weave of the canvas and know that it was painted that way. So it's a little bit of a give and take. I'm probably gonna do both, but when it comes to acrylic pours, I'm leaning more towards having them on wood than on canvas when I can help it. I just think it dries really cool. That being said, first up, I have canvas number 1. I want you guys to see the design. I'm really happy with how the colors came out on this one, and the edges are good. There's a couple places that I need to fill in. And this was where I did the colors just straight from the bottle. I didn't do a dirty cup pour right from the bottle onto the strainer, and that's how you're gonna get the cleanest colors. And you'll see really easily, I'll compare it with one of the dirty cup pours in a second. So for number 1, this was just 2 really thick coats of gesso, sanded in between each of them, and then an acrylic pour done on top. Of all of them, this is fighting to be my favorite, I think. The way the acrylic dried, it dried pretty smooth. I can see the weave of the canvas, but the colors stayed nice and separate, and there doesn't seem to be any really holes in it where it dried and there was maybe bubbles. So this works really well. This is actually the technique that I used to prep a ton of canvases yesterday. That's why I've been a little MIA. I've been working on canvases and also fighting with my body a little bit as it decided that migraines were a thing this week. So for number 2, this is another one where I poured the colors directly from the bottles onto the canvas. Colors stayed really clean. This is probably the best way to get the cleanest design if that's what you're going for. The edges are good. They came over really nicely, and I will say for both of these pouring from the bottle, the upside is you don't have to waste a lot of paint. I always have a hard time judging when I'm doing a dirty pour whether or not I have enough paint in my cup, and it could be because I don't do enough of them, but it just seems like a hard thing. You end up with a lot of paint on the canvas, and that's really what you're hoping to run off, because you don't want it to stay too thick or it won't dry correctly. Both of these, not an issue with that at all. And for number 2, this was just the really thin coats that I did over top. So I started with really thin gesso. I used a lot of water all the way up to making it a little bit thicker, but nothing thicker than like honey consistency. As far as the grain goes, you can see the grain of this a lot more than you can on the one where I applied 2 really thick coats of gesso. So there's that to consider, but overall I would say it looks nice, it looks smooth, there's nothing really coarse or grainy about it. So that's still a good way to go. Not my preferred method, but it's nice. Here's the one that makes me the saddest right now, because I love the colors. And this is the one where when it was just gesso, it was so smooth. I did 20 coats, varying consistencies, just using the same mixture that I did for the other one, kind of starting really thin, going all the way up to thicker, no thicker than honey. And if I prep another canvas like this, I'm just gonna have to paint directly on it and use the smoothness of the canvas. It was wasted on an acrylic pour. It could be because I did a 30 cup pour, and as a comparison, same paint, same technique, but here are the colors poured directly onto the canvas from the bottles, and here's the dirty cup pour. It creates more interesting blends on the dirty cup pour, but you really lose sight of the pattern. It's so hard to see, it's so dark, And the way that it dried, because there was so much more paint on this one, even though I had spun the wheel, spun some of the paint off and let it drip down the sides, there's a lot of kind of pockmarking in the center that I'm not a huge fan of. So if I do something with this, I'm going to have to paint over it, fill it in, add some texture to it or something to salvage that painting. And the last one. This is the other one that probably fights between my favorite. So this is another Dirty Cup pour. And for this one, I added a layer of Liquitex matte gel on top of this. And it had some of the same issues the other one did, where I feel like the paint was a little thick in some areas. Maybe I just need to spin it more off and get more of that paint off of there. But then you kind of lose some of the design, and I didn't want this middle white part to get too big. It's a little too distracting in my opinion, but the colors were really cool. I hope you guys can see that. They're very dark. This is one I feel like I could salvage just with some embellishments to hopefully bring out the rest of that. So surprisingly, favorite one again was this. If you want a really strong, striking pattern from the technique that I've been using, you want to pour your colors directly from the bottle on here. You don't want to do a dirty cup pour unless you're doing that just for a background. It just doesn't seem to go well. I did want to show you this one dried, and pictures of all of these are going to be up on Instagram so you can review them later. This gorgeous piece I believe has already been spoken for, but this is another example of doing the colors directly from the bottles through the strainer and spinning it. I just want to put a coat of gloss on top of this one. Nothing else is happening to it. It's staying just as is. I'm actually really happy with how this one came out, and it's so smooth. The paint just seems to flow better over the wooden boards. These next two I'm going to show you. You could hang them up anyway, but this is personally how I would put them up. These are other ones that nothing is going to happen to. I just need to finish them off and seal them. I am thinking of painting the edges because there wasn't enough paint to run down the sides, so they are plain. I painted white over top of them to kind of show off any of the dripping runs that just really didn't look good. And I think what I'm going to do is paint one on each side, the different colors that I used, since I only used 4 colors. And those are a really good example of how you have to know when to stop and when to keep going. I hated these pretty much up until the end. I felt like I had ruined my pour. It kept not being what I wanted it to do. But I just kept going at it, and I kept pushing forward until I got something that I actually really like these. I think with some gloss, it's really going to pop. I think part of it is because the colors that I used on these are hands down my favorite palette. And I don't know why, they're just colors that I found when I started to get into art, get back into art, and really started to get into painting. I had never messed with colors a whole lot before. I did a lot of black and white, and these colors just make me so happy. They're almost the primary colors, but not quite. This kind of olive oxide green just seems to work. Same thing with this really deep blue, very like rusty crimson red, and then just very like solid medium yellow. What's really funny to me about those colors is I look at them and they're not necessarily my favorite colors on their own. They're kind of I usually like something either very light or dark, but when they come together and they blend, and that's how I knew to press these 2 boards together, is because I knew they were hiding there underneath. And really these come back to one of the first paintings. This is a painting that I need to frame and seal for my own personal enjoyment. I love it. I don't think anybody else really loves it. But for me, the reason that I love it is because this painting was the first. It was the first of any sort of pouring acrylic that I did. And it was just the first thing I did when I got back into painting. So I really quite adore it. You can look at it and there's all sorts of things to see in it the more you look. There's little details and ways that the paint just bubbled up and dried, and you can see areas where the colors came through, areas where they blended. I could stare at this thing for hours, and I appreciate it so much, and it has a lot of sentimental value, because this wasn't supposed to even be a painting. I was just messing around. I had taped it down. I had an idea of pressing paper on top of it before I had even seen anybody do that. And I had probably 10 different pressings from the paper, and I was like, okay, like I can create a whole little collection around this. And I didn't love any of them as much as I loved the base. This wasn't even supposed to be a painting. It was just the paper where I poured out the color, and it was supposed to be the throwaway. And I looked at it, and I looked at the way that the paint dried, and I just loved it. And this poor piece of paper, it's had tape on it, it's rough on the back, it's getting ripped. So I really do need to frame it and keep it safe because it just means so much to me. I had a really hard day the other day where I was struggling because as much as I know that I like other areas and I've been working on it and I have other projects I'm working on, I have a lot of fun with acrylic pours. And I was like, there's already 1,000 acrylic pour artists. I don't need to be another one. And yet I keep having these comments of people that like the acrylic pours and would like to see them just finished. And really, that's part of my goal here, is other than getting to share with you guys my techniques and the way that I like to put colors together and share my work, you know, trying to be an artist. The reason a lot of us are putting ourselves out there like this is just, you need to find your thing and go ahead and pursue it. Even if you think that there's already thousands of people that are doing it. Okay, there's billions of people that live on this planet. Be the 1,001 and just do it anyway. That's advice that I received from a very dear loved friend, and I needed to hear that. It helped a lot. So those are what's coming. I'm probably gonna have some more acrylic pours finished up, put on the website. If you're ever interested in any of them, feel free to comment on the videos if you see something that you like. Otherwise, I hope that you are having a fantastic day. Have an absolutely beautiful weekend, and I will see you guys on Monday. Happy crafting. Bye.